and I'll manage the Facebook thing so that folks know that they can sign into this webinar to get more people in here. And all right. So just a real quick introduction so that we can get started and I can help folks on Facebook. Welcome to our virtual speaker event with Aaron from Trout Unlimited. Just quickly for folks who are in the Zoom webinar, there's a Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen and a chat feature, and that's where you can type in your questions at any time during the presentation. And then I'll make sure Aaron gets those questions at the end, and that's when he will answer them. And so my name is Rachel Bishop, and I'm the Community Programs Manager at Wenatchee River Institute, and we are an environmental learning center in Leavenworth. And our mission is to connect people, communities, and the natural world. And so as you can imagine, a lot of our programming is looking very different these days. And currently we made the decision to halt all in-person programs that we were having due to the rise of COVID-19 cases in Leavenworth and also the rise of cases in Chelan County. So for community programs, it's looking all like this, virtual presentations and virtual workshops. And for our youth education, we are doing virtual field trips with students. So we are contacting teachers throughout North Central Washington to work with them and their students and doing Zoom or Google virtual field trips with them, trying to do as much hands-on as we can and connecting them with the natural world in the best way that we can right now. And just a couple upcoming programs that we have in the community ed world at WRI. On December 14th, which is Monday, we have a virtual speaker from the Department of Natural Resources, and her name is Angie Lane, and she's gonna she will be speaking from wherever she is about the Washington State fire season of 2020. So she's gonna be talking about the Labor Day weekend event and what the winds meant for their suppression efforts and just some other information about our wildfire season and what it means and what they've learned for next year. And then also a virtual watercolor event on January 16th, and that's with Molly Hashimoto, and it's a winter focused one, so learning how to paint snow. Okay, so I'm going to introduce Aaron now so that he can go ahead with his presentation. So Aaron Penvose is a rare, multi-talented powerhouse working in Central Washington. Not sure what that means? He's like a water and fish whisperer, and that gives Aaron the capabilities to tackle the most challenging of projects with a steely resolve and uncommon shrewdness. His experience ranges from fieldwork in wilderness areas to work with state and federal agencies and consulting. For over a decade with Trout Unlimited, Aaron has demonstrated exceptional ability to work with landowners and agencies throughout Washington to promote measurable habitat restoration, resource conservation, and in-stream flow results with substantial experience managing large-scale projects and developing restoration programs for Trout Unlimited. Some might wonder if Aaron is a real man or a myth. In the world of stream restoration, maybe he is both. Take him fishing and find out for yourself. All right, Aaron, take it away.
Wonder who provided that. Thanks, Rachel. And thanks to everybody out there in the virtual platform and for taking the time to listen to me chat about one of our projects this evening. So yeah, I work for Trout Unlimited. Trout Unlimited is a national conservation organization whose mission is to reconnect, restore, and sustain fisheries in North America, more locally in Central Washington and most of Eastern Washington specifically. Our office, based out of Wenatchee, Twist, and Yakima, there's a whole gamut of different project work. Everything from monitoring and data collection to bridge and culvert replacements to large-scale irrigation infrastructure projects, and to the point that we're speaking of today, passage work and large-scale construction, which includes the Icicle Boulder Field project, which we're going to talk about in some detail this evening. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. The first slide on your screen is a view looking upstream from the Alpine Lakes trailhead towards the Icicle River Irrigation District Bridge. You can see in the distance there, and is everything in between there is locally known as the Boulder Field. So I'm sure most of the folks know or are oriented, but for those that may not, so if you're in Leavenworth and you basically go upstream, fly upstream along the river 5.6 miles, you'll hit Snow Lakes Trailhead on the Boulder Field project site. The project site encompasses about a quarter mile or 2,500 feet, and there's a lot going on within the site. Starting from the left on the radio dial, moving downstream to the right, we've got the Icicle River Irrigation District and City of Leavenworth Diversion Dam, characterized as A there. The IPID and COL diversion dam has been in place since the early 1920s. City of Leavenworth pulls off on river left and uses the diversion to deliver municipal water supply to the city. On river right, Icicle River Irrigation District diverts and delivers water downstream to irrigate orchards for the most part, from Leavenworth down all the way down to Monitor. As you move downstream, the blue line B is the old historic City of Leavenworth main line, which carries the water from the diversion down to the water treatment plant before it heads to town for drinking water supply for Leavenworth. The new fish screen location, which we'll talk about in detail later, is characterized at the point of that arrow in C. D is the Boulder Field site area where we did the construction work this year and had historically been an impediment to passage for fish historically. E is the Icicle River Irrigation District Road, which goes between Snow Lakes Trailhead parking lot and the new City of Leavenworth screen house, so C. And then F, everybody probably knows, the Alpine Lakes Trailhead. And just downstream of there, at the very bottom of this, as you're going downstream on the right side of your screen, is the City of Leavenworth's water treatment plant. We'll talk pretty specifically about the City of Leavenworth main line, the new fish screen, and the Boulder Field passage project. So just to, I guess, give some reason, if you boil it down, the whole reason for the Boulder Field passage project is to aid in the restoration of ESA listed species. There's 3 listed species in the Upper Columbia: Steelhead, Chinook, and Bull Trout. And this project's goal is to improve access for 2 of those species, Steelhead and Bull Trout, into some of the habitat above the Boulder Field and Upper Icicle Creek. It's pretty extensive main stem tributary habitat available based on some intrinsic models that were done, but approximately 23 miles of habitat will be open in the main stem, and then about the same amount of habitat in tributaries such as French Creek, Jack Creek, 8 Mile Creek, and 4th of July Creek. So again, it's really a focus on increasing abundance, productivity, and distribution for steelhead and bull trout. The focus and impetus for the project, all 3 portions of the work that we constructed this summer, is for that step pool channel enhancement. And the City of Leavenworth is getting a pretty significant and help pay for a pretty significant upgrade to their infrastructure. And most importantly, probably, is bringing their fish screen into compliance. They're going to have a new NOAA fisheries compliant fish screen, and their old fish screen was extremely outdated. One thing that I wanted to make a point of up front is that this is a great project for a lot of reasons. You know, obviously the fisheries benefit over the long term that we see, but also the you know, social and community benefits with the City of Leavenworth upgrade. But this is going to be a long process. It's not, this project is not a silver bullet for, you know, restoring steelhead populations in Icicle Creek or the Wenatchee Basin. It's something that's going to, you know, take a long process for colonization to occur. So I just wanted to point that out. What we did this year is, you know, not a super highway for fish to get into upper Icicle Creek. So the reason for this work is really based on a whole bunch of people sitting in a room, planning, talking about things, looking at the science. So a lot of scientists and policy makers evaluate conditions of the watershed and restoration potential of certain units of those watersheds. They often call them assessment units. And so back in the early 2000s, they put together a biological strategy, which prioritized Lower Icicle Creek as a #2 priority. And the #2 habitat project or work that could be done ranked in that process was basically the Boulder field and anthropogenic barriers. More recently, the RTT has reevaluated their, RTT is the regional technical team, which evaluates restoration in the Wenatchee, re-ranked, and it's currently, the project is currently sitting #3 for steelhead, number 3 total in restoration, #4 for bull trout. So just in a regional context, it's important. It sat #5 for steelhead across the region, which is basically the Upper Columbia. So all of these, you know, scientists and policies makers are guiding the restoration work, and I guess led us to the Boulder Field project and the construction thereof. So with that, I wanted to also make the point that before I get into the details of the project, that there is already passage during discrete moments in time. There, back in, this photos of back in 2014 when one of the engineers and consultants was doing some survey work, saw this adult bull trout trying to pass in September. Don't know if it was successful or not, but there's obviously bull trout upstream of the Boulder field currently. There's also been evidence of steelhead making it upstream, and in 2016, I believe, WDFW, when working with IPID on improving the diversion dam, found a juvenile Chinook parr as well. So there's already passage. It's just the moment in time in which it happens has to be right with flows, conditions, and obviously the critters need to be there to trying to make it up. So a little bit of project background I think is important. It's been a long time in the making. I actually started this project, or started the conversation with this project back in 2009. I was looking for a place to do some work where we have a local chapter that's really actively involved and engaged, and a lot of other people weren't working, and see if we couldn't figure out a partnership project. So I sat down with the Bureau of Reclamation and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and had a meeting about what project priorities could be, you know, of high merit in the Icicle. And after leaving that meeting, it was fairly clear if you were going to make a significant gain for the fisheries and the, you know, long-term resilience of steelhead and bull trout in the system, it was worth taking a pretty good look at the Boulder field, because below there's a pretty short amount of stream miles for habitat for fish. And so I started down that path, started working with folks to, you know, get a better handle on it. And in 2010, put together a funding package to do a suite of assessments. And those included, site monitoring, evaluation, preliminary survey work, hydrologic analysis, anthropogenic influence in the area on the site, and worked through that for about the course of 3 years. It included some extensive modeling. We got together a technical advisory committee, which consisted of a bunch of agency people, local fish biologists, and some of the local NGOs, and had long discussions about, what the project might look like if there was something to there to move forward on. And we finished that in 2013, and based on the report that our consultants, which included one of the preeminent fish passage biologists and highly decorated geomorphologist in Washington State, it seemed like there was a viable project there. With the information we had from that design report, or preliminary design report, we moved forward into evaluating what designs were actually feasible considering the dynamic nature of the site, and started that work in 2014 and worked through that all the way through 2016. Of that came 5 different alternatives, and of those 5 alternatives, there was sub-alternatives, but we ended up choosing a preferred alternative with the help of the technical advisory committee that we had formed back in the early design phase or evaluation phase, and essentially is the design that went on the ground this year. So in 2017, once we had the design complete, we started moving towards making the project real. And that included a bunch of agreements and permitting and all of the things that have to happen for a construction project to move forward. Funding for the project had to be raised. And so we spent about 3 years working through that piece of it. And so it all culminated this year in the spring with some of the permits and the agreements coming in. We obviously had to work closely with Icicle Irrigation District because they own the property where the Boulder field sits. So we had long negotiations with them about what would need to happen, including fish screening for their facility on the other side of the river from the city of Leavenworth, which is, I think, still planned to happen next year. They will get a new screening facility as part of the work. Because of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Bureau Reclamation obligations to the tribal fisheries, there was a lot of tribal interest in this project, and so there had to be negotiations between the agencies and the tribes to, address future evaluations of how the project might, impact that tribal fishery and the hatchery. We had to work with the city of Leavenworth to get their approval and blessing on all this work. And then U.S. Forest Service had to provide us an access agreement because the road there is under their jurisdiction. And so we worked through all those agencies just to get the agreements in place to get the permissions to do the work. In addition to all that, there was a smorgasbord and a long process of permitting where we went through the various public notices process, including SEPA and NEPA, and 401 certification with ecology, and 404 with Army Corps of Engineer, local permits through WDFW, the county, and yeah, there's probably a half dozen others, but quite the process. But got there this, I guess, probably a little more than a year, or a little less than a year from now, prior to construction this spring. This slide is interesting. We had somebody interested in doing a drone flight, so we coordinated them doing a drone flight over last February, I think this was taken. And they provided us some data, but this slide in particular, I think, is interesting because it shows the dynamics and then, I guess, the nick point in the Boulder field reach. If you, on the downstream end of yours, on the bottom of your screen is the downstream end of the site. You can see the big rock on the left. That's what we coined the anchor rock. It's the giant monstrosity of a rock on the right bank of Icicle Creek there at the Boulder field. But once it drops below that rock, you can see how wide the width of the creek gets there. But between that anchor rock on the river right and the boulders on the river left where we put the passageway through this summer, it narrows significantly. In addition to that, it drops significantly. But then as you move upstream above that area right there, it starts to widen again. And so that was really the crux of this, and through all the geomorphic assessments and modeling that went on, it really constricts right there, and the elevation drops pretty quickly. So I mentioned it briefly in the first or third slide, but there are three major project components that we took under contract this year. And in the contract, they're called schedules. Schedule A was the replacement of the water line for the main line of the city of Leavenworth from the fish screen, the new fish screen house, down to the treatment plant. That included about 1,600 feet of 16-inch ductile iron and about 100 feet of 14-inch ductile iron, and then all of the appurtenances that go with putting in a water line, valves and gates and all of those different things. Schedule B was the construction of the step pool channel and the channel adjustment that happened just upstream, where we took a few rocks and carved them, so to speak, to kind of guide flow through the boulder field. And then Schedule C was the upgrade to the fish screen facilities for the city of Leavenworth, which also included deconstruction of their old fish screen, which was pretty dilapidated, in pretty dilapidated conditions and right on the edge of Icicle Creek upstream from the IPID bridge. One thing that was really challenging for us after going through all the planning and the processes and the permitting, and then getting to the point where we thought we could get to construction, was getting these three components all in one contract. Schedule A was designed by a consultant out of Spokane called Varela & Associates. Schedule B was designed by the fish passage guru, Pat Powers, and Waterfall Engineering. And Schedule C was designed by WDFW. They led that effort and worked with the city of Leavenworth to design that. But over time, as we were working through all the processes as we were approaching construction, it made sense, rather than piecemeal it out, to include them all together. Probably most of the reason for that seemed to be for cost savings. Raising funds for this kind of work is challenging. Any way you can save money is good, and we're always looking to do that because a lot of it's public funding, and we try to be good shepherds of that money. It also allowed for consolidation of management and reduced the amount of coordination that needed to happen between different parties to make the project work. And so we took the lead on it, and were able to facilitate the process with a team rather than having three separate teams. And then lastly, again, I guess predominantly in regards to the cost share piece, if we didn't do them all at the same time and did them staggered or phased, there would have been some kind of intermediate pieces or steps to make the systems work. So there would have been additional costs for different pieces that we were able to eliminate by just getting it all under contract and doing it all at once. So where we're at now is we went to bid in March, and we're able to get, I think we had 6 or 7 bidders on the project. We're able to qualify the second lowest bidder, Strider Construction, and got them under contract in April. Construction started, I think around the 15th of April, and is still ongoing today. Schedule A is substantially complete, which is the water line from the treatment plant to the new screen building. Schedule B, the step pool channel, is complete for now. We do anticipate some I guess, adaptive management next year, depending on how flows go. We've already seen some changes in the channel, so we'll evaluate it after the spring freshet and see what, if anything, needs to happen there, but it's complete as designed. And Schedule C is ongoing. The screen building is now dried in and most of the appurtenances are in place. We expect that the commissioning for the screen house will be sometime the end of this month. And then the contractor will come back next spring and do some, minor grading, cleanup and whatnot because the ground's frozen now. So not too exciting, this waterline stuff, which is a lot of the work that TU actually does, but I wanted to you think of somebody placing a water line as kind of just like, oh, you dig a trench, you put the pipe in, make sure it's level, and bed it and bury it, and move down the transgress. Well, it was, except for the site, and this site in particular provided us some interesting challenge. I guess I'll just say challenges. If on the picture on the river left, you can see we always wondered where or why the city of Leavenworth historic water line was right. It was basically right in Icicle Creek along this whole section between the fish screen or the fish house or screen house and the IPID bridge moving upstream to downstream. It was exposed in some areas along the creek. Well, when the contractor finally got to that section of the pipeline install and started excavating, you can see the wave train on the picture on the left, where each one of those bumps is a giant boulder. And so the forefathers that put the water line in probably ran into that same wave train and decided to bail and moved the water line off closer to the Icicle Creek edge. And so yeah, that was a challenge. The contractor to go in and break all of those rocks, get all of the material out of there, and then get the bedding in a good enough condition for the pipe to be there for the next 60 or 80 years, however long it goes. The other challenge with the excavation of the water line was in some places, because of the it's a gravity system, so your elevation at the top, obviously is pushing, you got to push downhill to get the water to flow. And there wasn't much drop between the screen house and the water treatment plant. And so as a result, at the lower end of the project where the Icicle or Alpine Lakes parking lot is, the excavation depth was quite deep. That picture there, I think that's a 12. They excavated 16 feet deep across the entrance to the Alpine. In addition to that, when they started excavating, even though we were at that point right adjacent to where the old pipe was, they found rocks the size of the outhouse in the Alpine Lakes Wilderness, which you see on the bottom right. That's I think a class 300 excavator, which is no small excavator, pulling that rock out of the trench where they were placing the water line by the water treatment plant. So it's just putting a pipe in the ground, but in this case, it was quite a challenge for the contractor. So the Boulder Field project, this is the final design sheet as planned. The work went in as we anticipated it. It was a lot of excavation and a lot of I think trial by the contractor to figure out how to make the excavation work in the tight conditions and steep conditions and large material that we were working with, but we're able to do it. One thing I'd point out is there's two really, can you see my cursor? Maybe
yes,
not.
we can see it. Yeah.
Yeah, you can. This boulder right here is boulder 14. Huh? Yeah. and is basically the fishway, and Boulder 11, or Boulder 17, excuse me, down below it also is critical. And those are two rocks that you'll see as the project progressed that you can kind of key into. But these were on essentially the shoreline, right? And so everything that we constructed for the step pool channel was between the historic Icicle channel, went back behind those two boulders onto the slope just below the Icicle Shasta Irrigation District. Road there. In the top left corner is
Aaron, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Can you still see the screen?
No, I think for some reason it took you off, but you can just click share screen again and then.
You got me back?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, I don't know what happened. As I was saying, the picture on the far left, those wattles, that's basically where the channel is now. And so all of that material from there had to be excavated all the way down to the basically base flow of Icicle Creek in that location. The picture in the upper right-hand corner shows those three boulders. They also, in addition to constructing a step pool channel, we needed to, based on the hydraulics and the way that the flow needed to go both down the fishway and towards the anchor rock down the current and historic channel, needed to be carved. And so the contractor had a specialty rock breaking group out of Canada actually shape those boulders and cleave the tops and sides off of them to make flow go where it needed to go once construction was complete. Those are no small rocks. The bottom left photo was a good demonstration of the work that was being conducted. That's the engineer Pat Powers doing assessment of the elevations and widths and lengths and depths of the pools as Strider was working through them. The rock with the big crack in it is the Boulder 17, which I mentioned. I'll bring that back up in a little bit, but it's kind of it has that rock is not there anymore. It's not. It is the Boulder 14, which was currently or historically on the hill slope, the one that's sitting there off the wattles in the upper left photo. And then the bottom right is the construction just as they were starting to, I guess, fine tune the step pools. We were fortunate in this case on several of the steps where we were able to, the contractor was able to get native rock, so bedrock or large boulders that were under the large boulders that were already removed to act as the steps and the drops, which was really good from a stability perspective for the future of the project. It's not advancing now. No, there it goes. Okay, Schedule C. I think the big thing with Schedule C is The historic water line is that red line that runs through the entirety of the photograph there. We only replaced the portion of the water line from the start of the yellow down to the treatment plant. So the upper portions of the City of Leavenworth main line are still in place, and we just connected to them right there, and then demolished the old screen house, which you can see in the photo that's inset in the picture. Clearly had been there. I think it was circa 1950, if I remember right, or 52. So it'd been there a long time, past its useful life, I would say. But we got it out of the creek, and it's now basically where the outfall pipe for the new screen house building sits. The yellow box is where the new screen house has been constructed and is now being dried in. Some of the features of that are the picture on your right is the vault, which holds the screen and the pipelines that come from upstream to downstream and serve the water, but also push fish back to the creek and the fish bypass. And then there's also an overflow high flood bypass in the structure. But that structure was set in pieces. They basically brought in and stacked the concrete. It's basically a block system, and set that up to build the vault and get it in place. And then they use this material called masting to kind of glue or seal the pieces together. Inside that vault in the upper left-hand corner is this fish screen. The water comes in, basically fills that vault up. Any water that goes into the City of Leavenworth pipe goes through the screen there, drops down and goes out downstream towards the City of Leavenworth treatment plant, and basically is sitting full of water. And as the city, takes it, it sends more water down, and whatever isn't being used at a certain elevation will bypass to the creek. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner is the beginning of what looks to be of actual building and final construction of the facility. I think they were drying that in about 2 weeks ago, I think is when that picture was taken. When it's finalized, the grade will be up from the picture you see there, but that's generally what it'll look like. So total construction of the project is about $2.8 million. We had a whole host of funders, everything from salmon recovery funding to the City of Leavenworth contributed a significant amount of funding to make the project happen. No small effort to go out and ask 9 different entities to chip in and make it happen. And ultimately we ended up, I think, with a full pot of funding about the time we were ready to go to bid. And so it came together last minute. We're going to be right about on budget. Yeah, very thankful for the folks that stepped up to contribute to get this whole host of work done. Other partners, significant partners, there's a lot. I mentioned a few there on the slide. Icicle River Irrigation District has been Tony Yonser from the IPID has been a advocate of the project since the very beginning, and was very instrumental in helping us move through the process from all the way from essentially when we started the initial designs in 2010 to now. Lots of other natural resource and conservation agency partners as well. So, and then a lot of people behind the scenes and working on details all along made it happen. So I guess I always like to kind of summarize or close on these things with the lessons learned, so to speak, or what made it interesting or challenging. To no surprise, the first thing on the list is just the site itself. It's, we understood that it was bedrock driven landscape, that it, had, glacial influences from, the 10,000, 12,000 years ago that, deposited all that material there. There was no doubt that there was the stuff you could see on the surface that was going to be an excavation and construction challenge. Fortunately, you get contractors, good contractors who do these, heavy excavation projects, and they find ways to make it happen within the limitations that you have. And we definitely have gotten a contractor that does that. But one thing that nobody knew and was probably the reason that it was so difficult to implement was what was underground. And we had no idea. We did geotechnical analysis, did some, preliminary site drilling to see, whether at what point we hit, boulder versus bedrock versus, is there alluvial deposits in between some of these places. All of that, really lent itself is we're not going to know until we get out there and start digging and try and find out. And so, with all of the time we spent trying to analyze it, it really was unknown until the time at which the construction company started digging, and there was a lot of big material. The stuff you see in the channel is the stuff that was below ground, and so I think it challenged all of us throughout the summer, but we got there. Like I mentioned previously, the project management was unique because of the different phases and entities that had designed the work. Having one contractor was good in that respect, is we could have one point of contact, but there's still lots of hands in the cookie jar trying to figure out the details and make things happen. TU was the lead on that. Our office is not a huge consulting firm. We're a small subsidiary to a larger NGO, and there's only about 5 of us that do these big projects in the regional office. And so mostly myself and one other project manager managed this, and it was difficult with the resources. The current state of affairs that we're in was also challenging with outside obligations and family personal management of things. And so that was a unique characteristic of trying to get this thing through as well, which led to leads me to the COVID thing. Right when we were going to contract is when the state orders for shutdowns and mandates and all of that was happening. We had no idea how it was going to impact the construction contract side of things. Fortunately, because of the city of Leavenworth and municipal water supply, we were able to get exemption for basically required work, but also had to go through fairly arduous process of putting together COVID response plans and COVID plans for us, for the contractors, for all of the consultants and agencies that we were working with that were going to be out on site. And so it turned into adding a whole nother layer of stuff on top. And then the construction economy, we didn't know with the COVID and the way things were, how that was going to impact delivery and scheduling and timing of materials for the project. And it's part of the reason why we were hoping to be done in November, and we're still in December working through it. We had a really big bid range. You never really know these bigger projects what you're going to get, but I think we had the low bid at 2.3 and the high bid was somewhere around 4. And so working through that and making sure your contractors didn't miss something or whatever was a process in itself, but ended up turning out pretty good. And then just funding, ensuring that we had enough money to get us through the work and get it done. So with that, I'm going to share, I don't know, am I doing okay on time or?
Before you go to the next thing, Aaron, there was a question to go back to the slide showing before and after. That was immediately prior to the slide showing the city screen. Do you know which slide they're talking about?
Okay.
It looks like they just want to take a longer look at it for a second.
Yeah, if you look at the top left photo in the bottom right corner, you can see a painting of 17 on there. So that's the rock that I asked you guys to pay attention to that has the split in it in the picture on the upper right corner. That's 17. And so all of the channel that was built is behind 17 and 14, those two rocks there in the upper left, which is the before picture.
And Aaron, do you want to take questions now or do you want to show that video first? Looks like there's a potential Aaron is kicked off. But if you just hold on a sec, we'll try and get him back. All right, folks, Aaron is just going to click the link and be right back in. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Welcome back, Aaron. I can see.
Is it working?
Yeah, I can see your screen. Just yeah, pull up that video.
Go.
No. Oh, yep, see it. It's up.
That's it. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
No, you were on mute.
Oh.
That's what it was. You were on mute. Okay.
Great. Do you want to take
You got
questions now? Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, go ahead and stop sharing your screens, and then we'll I'll ask some of the questions that we've got here. Okay, so the first question's coming from Kim, and the question is, because of this project, will fishing be closed on the Icicle at some point in time, and if so, when?
Well, fishing what? I'm sorry, you broke up.
Oh, that's okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right, so the question is, because of this project, will fishing be closed on the Icicle at some point in time? And if so, when?
Yeah, I am not the person to answer that question. There was discussion about that with the technical advisory committee and folks, that stakeholder process that we went through. Ultimately, NOAA Fisheries and National Marine Fisheries Service are responsible for ESA listed fish, and the rules and guidelines that they give to WDFW is what ultimately makes or changes fishing regulations. I don't, speaking just from my personal conversations and the evolution of this project, I don't see that happening. There's lots of fisheries in the region that have both listed species and resident trout fishing. The Yakima is a perfect example. So is the Methow. So I don't envision it, but I'm not a regulator or rule maker, and so time will tell.
All right, great. Okay, another question from Bruce. How optimistic are you that steelhead, bull trout, etc., will go above the Boulder field, and over what sort of time frame?
So we don't know. Prior to implementation, we had one. So there's a fish tag array that was installed by WDFW in 2015. Since that time, one adult steelhead was pinged or identified going above the Boulder field. It actually came back down as well. So typically when fish are moving up and then come back down, they're typically kelt, which means they spawn. And so prior to one, and I don't know, but all of the biologists have said that we shouldn't expect it to be, a mass migration and a quick repopulation into Upper Icicle. Upper Icicle doesn't have a ton of spawning habitat for steelhead, typical spawning habitat. It's more pocket water type stuff behind big boulders where deposit of substrate is right. So it's going to take time.
All right, we've got a question from Gru, and the question is, was there a significant amount of downwater silt created by the construction? If so, how would that affect the wildlife?
The what? What was created?
Yeah, I'll ask it again. Was there a significant amount of downwater silt created by construction?
There wasn't, and those wattles that the straw tubes and silt fencing was placed along the project. The work was done mostly, well, entirely in the dry until the last day when we opened flow up. And so the only silt would have been what was in the channel at that time. The flow that was going into the channel at that time was not enough to actually force water from the top pool all the way down to the bottom pool and into the main stem flow of Icicle Creek. So there was 4 or 5 days of settling out, so to speak, of the silt before the rain event. And at that point, the Icicle Creek was dirty and turbid already. And so I think it's insignificant impact on the wildlife.
Great. All right, we've got a question from Mike. Can you tell a little bit more about boulder shaping? Is dynamite used or drilling only?
Yeah, so no dynamite was used. Through the permitting process in the 401 certification with Department of Ecology on water quality, we proposed a medium explosive charge that was similar to dynamite, but through that process, they wouldn't allow us to use that because of the TMDL and their water quality concerns in regards to the TMDL. So we ultimately only ended up with two tools in our toolbox. One was breaking the rocks through brute force and the machinery that was available to us. And the other was a product called Magnum Buster, which is a very low velocity explosive. As a kid, I guess it's something similar to an M80, maybe a little bit bigger. So yeah, they're called low velocity explosives. And we used the crew out of Canada that we hired. They used some of those to shape the rock, but most of the work was done, well, a good portion of the work was done with just brute force.
All right, we've got a question from Matt, and Matt is wondering, down to what discharge will the channel step pool be passable? And on a less serious note, how are we going to keep tourists from chugging beer and grilling bratwursts in the pools?
Those are both really good questions. Yeah, to answer the first question, CFS up to just about 1,000. CFS is the passage window for fish through the step pool channel. There may be another passage route at 2,500 CFS, but that's more just the modeling demonstrated that, so we're not sure about that. And then in regards to the hot dogs and beer, I'm not really sure, but Icicle Shasta Irrigation District owns that. And so I think they could probably choose to manage it if they so chose. Good question.
All right, this question is about another project for Trout Unlimited. So is Trout Unlimited going to be helping out with bull trout restoration on Gold Creek up near Snoqualmie Pass? That's another big project.
I am not familiar with that project and don't know if TU will be involved. Something we'd certainly entertain and engage ourselves in if there was room to add value.
Great. All right, and then we've got a question about tubers. Do you think tubers on the lower Icicle during the summer affects fish life that are heading up the creek?
Yeah. Fish are, yeah. Fish are very sensitive species. They pick up on lots of things. I have no idea whether the local tourism industry and tubers in specific have a detrimental effect, but certainly in a very distinct location, if a tuber goes over a spawning bed and stands up, that's not a good situation for salmon and steelhead in Icicle Creek.
Okay, so then we had someone type in a question to me before the event, and looks like it's a long question, but basically they're asking about why we want to save the bull trout and suggest that they are equal to steelhead. And it sounds like back in the day, they were told to kill bull trout if they caught them up at Lake Wenatchee. Bottom feeders, not good eating. They eat large numbers of our valuable migrating salmon fry. So yeah, so why are we spending money to save the bull trout, basically is the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think, all life has intrinsic value, right? And so, at a very basic level, I think that's an important point to consider. The bull trout and the steelhead were interacting and commingling long before we showed up in the Wenatchee Valley or in Washington State or anywhere in the West, really. So I think from that perspective, it's valuable to protect them. The other thing is they're on the verge of blinking out. It's just, they're endangered species. And so, whether from a recreational standpoint or a predatory standpoint, whether they're more valuable than steelhead, I don't know the answer to that. But certainly because of their ESA listing and I guess the directives that come with that, it seems like a important effort for our mission, for Trout Unlimited's mission, to try and help them as best we can.
And then there was just a quick comment, I think, related to the question about the Gold Creek project. And Katie was just saying that the Gold Creek project is currently managed by the Kittitas Conservation Trust. So maybe they know if Trout Unlimited is going to participate.
Yeah. Thanks, Katie. We'll look into it.
So those are all the questions we have from the audience. I'll give folks just another minute or so if they'd like to type in one last question. But while we wait, I would like to thank you, Aaron, for your flexibility to present via Zoom and deal with technical problems throughout. Yeah, thank you for that. And thanks for answering all the questions from the crowd.
Thanks for the opportunity. Usually I'm the most technological challenge, so it's it was great to have the opportunity to speak to everybody and tell a little bit of the story about our work and what we were trying to do there.
Yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. And if you want to learn anything more about other programs coming up at Wenatchee River Institute, the best way to do that is to sign up for our e-newsletter by going to our website, WenatcheeRiverInstitute.org, or you can follow us on social media if you have it. Hope everybody has a great rest of December, and maybe we'll see you on Monday night at our other virtual presentation. And thank you again, Aaron.
Thanks, Rachel. Bye, everybody.